Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, we're talking about the biggest Timberwolves win in, frankly, recent memory. Timberwolves overheat on Wednesday night at Target Center on Thanksgiving Eve. This is something of a post-game podcast. We're going to talk about key takeaways from that game, what we can pull out of that thing and apply moving forward, as well as individual studs and duds, and a peek ahead to Wolves-Hornets on Friday night. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked on Wolves podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked on Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend and holiday weekend if you're celebrating Thanksgiving weekend, hopefully spending time with family. This is a little bit of a belated post-game podcast in honor of Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving travel and all the stuff that comes along with it. So this podcast is going to be mostly about the Wednesday night game that I'm sure you, along with myself and all Timberwolves fans, are still thinking about. The Wolves over the Heat Wednesday night, defeating Jimmy Butler. We're going to talk all about it on the show today. The Anthony Edwards dunk that wasn't, but should have been, and was, if we're being honest. We're talking about all that on the show. We'll also look ahead to Wolves-Hornets here at the tail end of the program today. That's Friday night's first end of a really tough road back-to-back on the East Coast for the Timberwolves. So that's all upcoming on the show. First of all, a thank you off the top for making Locked On your first listen, Locked On Wolves. Well, any Locked On show, but hopefully Locked On Wolves is your first listen each and every day. Then make any other Locked On show your second listen. Remember, Locked On Wolves is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, as well as all the audio platforms from Apple to Google, Spotify to the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CK. Yet Wednesday night, the Timberwolves beat the Miami Heat at Target Center. It was set up to be one of the most exciting Timberwolves games in recent memory, and I understand that that's a little bit sad. We're talking about the 18th game of the season. The Timberwolves coming into the game were, I think, 11th in the Western Conference. I get why that's crazy if you're a non-Timberwolves fan, but if you are a Timberwolves fan, think about this. This is, Thanksgiving Eve. It's going to be a big crowd at Target Center. Jimmy Butler's returning with the Heat, who are 12-6 coming into the game, had won, I think, 6 out of their last 7 or 7 of their last 8. The Timberwolves were on a 4-game win streak, hadn't won 5 straight since Jimmy Butler was in a Timberwolves uniform. The Wolves are clicking on all cylinders. This is the chance for Anthony Edwards to go toe-to-toe with Jimmy Butler to get some revenge for his buddy Karl-Anthony Towns. All these ingredients are kind of mixed together. And then the Timberwolves start out this game behind the 8 ball. Towns picks up 3 fouls. He's playing really well to start the game, picks up 3 fouls in the first 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes of the game, has to sit the rest of the first half. But Ant, mostly by himself, in terms of scoring at least, keeps the Timberwolves within, striking distance. They're actually up at the end of the first quarter, despite Towns going out early with foul trouble. And then just a couple of minutes or less than that in game time after the third foul, not the second, the third foul to Karl-Anthony Towns, Patrick Beverley goes down with a leg injury. He's questionable to return, ends up not returning, groin injury. Obviously not a good thing for the Timberwolves. Hard to say what his long-term prognosis is as of this recording, a little less than 24 hours after the game. And certainly a little, we don't know yet what Beverley's status is going to be like this weekend in Charlotte or in Philadelphia. But two big blows, 2 starters that are effectively out for the rest, they were both out the rest of the first half. The Wolves were still up 3 at the end of the first. They ended up trailing by 8 at halftime, but it was double digits late in the second quarter, kind of hovering around that 10-point mark. And Chris Finch said after the game, he considered bringing Towns back, even with the 3 fouls, but decided that because the Wolves were hanging with around that double digit, that 10-point deficit, it wasn't worth trying to risk the 4th foul at that point, because Naz Reid and a combination of Jaden McDaniels, Jared Vanderbilt did enough to keep this thing close enough that Finch didn't feel the need to risk a 4th foul on Towns in the first half. Ended up working out really well. What I want to do is I don't want to blow by blow the second half of this thing. But overall, the Timberwolves had a strong third quarter, spurred by Anthony Edwards. I want to talk about high points. And then the fourth quarter was all D'Angelo Russell. We'll talk about high points there as well. So if we're talking high points, now that we've set up why this was such an impressive win for the Wolves, and they end up winning by 12, of course, the third quarter, we have to talk about the Anthony Edwards dunk. I probably should have just started with this. If you're listening to this or you're watching this on YouTube, you've seen the dunk. You've probably seen it from at least 3 or 4 different angles. I think I saw at least 4 different angles. There's a couple of crowd videos. There's certainly the baseline look. There's the sideline look. There's the center court. There's probably 6 different angles that are out there at this point. It's insane. The Anthony Edwards, this was a basically a 2-foot takeoff, the tiptoe of his left foot on the edge of the paint. So effectively a 2-foot takeoff from outside the paint. As he's gathering, the defender Vincent is still like a step and a half away, still working to get into position to try and take the charge. This is Gabe Vincent, the defender. And by the time he's set, Ant is already taken off. And the only reason they make contact, really, outside of probably Ant's knee would have hit Vincent in the head, was because Vincent put his arms up to protect himself and take the charge. That's the only reason that Ant made contact. Otherwise, it was almost would have been like LeBron over John Lucas III, like a decade ago or whatever that was on the baseline down in Miami when he literally jumped over him. That's almost what this was. And so Vincent initiated the contact. He wasn't entirely set. Edwards jumped over him. Should not have been an offensive foul. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think in an honest moment that the league would admit that too. And obviously, I'm sure the league was upset about it, by the way. This is a complete aside, but now everybody's complaining about the officiating instead of having the dunk of the year. They can't use this on commercials now, right? The NBA's, their hands tied. They can't use something where a foul was called. And it was a bad call. It just was. And it ruined a lot of stuff by them calling that an offensive foul. It's just ridiculous. But it's one of the, I mean, it's right up there with the dunk last year. That was against Toronto. That was an and one correctly. The Ant had on the left baseline. It has to be about the dunk of the year. And I don't care whether or not that was an offensive foul, whether it was called an offensive foul. It's basically the dunk of the year at this point. And I think we need to treat it as such. And it is being treated as such on social media for the most part. But that was the third quarter, and was part of this incredible push. I mean, Ant had the big game time 3 in the third quarter. He was really what kind of brought the Wolves all the way back. Minnesota going into the fourth, excuse me, at this point is up 3, I believe, going to the fourth. And then D'Lo finally came to life after a really slow first 3 quarters. D'Angelo Russell scored 10 of his 20 points in the fourth and helped the Wolves put it away. Had one really nice hesitation crossover and layup in the paint, which is not the sort of thing we're used to seeing from D'Lo. He's obviously more the fadeaway mid-range jumper or the deep 3-point guy than he is, the crossover, get into the paint, risk getting some contact. But D'Lo did that here. Other high points from this game. This is a little, I mean, just quick mentions that aren't necessarily my key takeaways, because we'll get into that next. I talked about the D'Lo fourth quarter. The Pat Bev injuries obviously looms large. I mean, the Wolves, to their credit, were fantastic defensively without Patrick Beverley for the vast majority of this game. That's important. I also want to shout out Jared Vanderbilt to make sure I get to him on the show. 15 rebounds in 25 minutes for Vando. 7 of them were offensive rebounds. 8 points, 15 rebounds, 4 steals, 3 assists, 25 minutes played, 2 of 3 shooting, made 4 of his 5 free throw attempts. I mean, Chris Finch made some comments before the season. I think it might have been at the Minnesota State Fair in August about Jaden McDaniels having a little bit of Dennis Rodman to his game. I mean, if we're talking about somebody with a little bit of, understandably, a little bit of Dennis Rodman, I'm not making any bold proclamations here. I mean, is it Jared Vanderbilt? Is a line like 8, 15, 4, and 3 with only 3 field goal attempts in 25 minutes? That's a little more Rodman-like than what McDaniels does. And also the ruggedness of Vando's game. The rebounding ability is obviously much better than McDaniels. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm immediately retracting this. It wasn't Rodman. It was Scottie Pippen, other Bulls player that Finch said. So never mind. Scratch out what I just said. But still, maybe this is what this is. Maybe McDaniels turns into Pippen, Vando turns into Rodman, Ant turns into Michael Jordan. I don't know. That's not going to happen. But there is a little bit of Rodman to Vando's game. Again, not the same player, but the stat line, the way he plays, his aggressiveness in the backcourt, trying to get, kind of cheap steals on inbounds plays, sneak up on guys that are dribbling the ball up the court and, steal the ball from behind, that type of a thing that Rodman used to do. And McDaniels, while he's been a little bit disappointing this year, I understand the Pippen comp from Finch's perspective as well. So there you go. I kind of sort of brought it full circle. So at any rate, a little bit of a Rodman game from Vando, and great to see him continue to play well next to Karl-Anthony Towns. Okay. Next, what I want to do is I want to hit key takeaways, because there's some stuff I haven't talked about yet that I want to make sure I get to regarding the Wolves offense and the way that it's flowed overall, and what we can take out of this game and apply moving forward. Before we do that, though, let's talk about our friends over at betonline.ag. It's Thanksgiving weekend. We all know what that means. Football. Nothing goes better with football than turkey and betting. BetOnline has you covered all holiday season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this Thanksgiving. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, we're stuffed with deals this Thanksgiving. All right, let's talk key takeaways. So I mentioned this on Twitter after the game on a Wednesday night, but what this game tells me, like if I'm just taking, let's just take the win streak, right? The 5-game win streak, look at those 5 games in a line and just look at the box scores. And there's been multiple games where one member of the big three, every member of the big three has had at least one game in this stretch where they just haven't played well and somebody else has carried the team. This is another one of those games. Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play badly. He just didn't play much at all, period, in the first half and was relatively quiet in the second half. He had a plus 21. He led the team in plus minus for what it's worth. Generally played well, right? But he was quiet. I mean, an 11-6 night in 29 minutes is not what we're typically going to see. 11 points on 12 shots. That's not a Karl-Anthony Towns night. D'Angelo Russell was quiet till the fourth. This was Anthony Edwards' show. And what was it, 3 nights ago? I think it was maybe the San Antonio game last Thursday. A week ago, but I guess 3 games ago. Ant was really quiet. He had like 13 points against the Spurs, but Cat had a monster game. D'Lo was solid. And we've seen this where it's either Ant or it's Cat. Occasionally it's D'Lo. D'Lo is more like a quarter at a time where he gets hot and suddenly he can't miss. And as long as he's actually hot and is, instead of he just thinks he is, because that happens sometimes too. But at least during the stretch, D'Lo's had these stretches where he's great, but Cat and Ant are almost taking turns dominating games. And if they all fire in the same cylinder, I mean, like over the weekend, 2-3 games in a row where they just completely blew out the opposition. The game last Saturday when they won by 43 against Memphis, when they're all playing well, I mean, that's obviously ideal. But if Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns can each be the guy any given night, then this team has the ability to win any given night. If one of those guys can be a 1A superstar on any given night, they're going to win. And that gives them the opportunity to be in every single game. And this was a great example of that. And D'Angelo Russell's talked post-game about this being Ant's game, him taking over. The fact that that D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns are willing to just kind of cede control to Ant at times and understand that at times it's just going to be Ant's game to win or Ant's game to lose. I think that's okay. I mean, I think that that's showing signs of growth and maturity. As long as Anthony Edwards understands that sometimes it's going to be Towns' turn to take over. Towns is still a much more efficient scorer for the most part than Anthony Edwards. And he has been this season. He has been throughout his career, but they score in different ways. And it depends on how the opposing team is defending the Timberwolves. And it depends on, the flow of the game. And it depends on which player's hot. There's lots of different factors, but if the Wolves can hand the keys to Ant or hand the keys to Cat or occasionally hand the keys to D'Lo, they can win games with only one of those guys being piping hot. And this was a great example of that. I thought that was really encouraging. The second key takeaway, and I can't believe I'm 15 minutes or so into this podcast and hadn't mentioned this yet, but Malik Beasley was fantastic stepping in for Patrick Beverley. Pat Bev only played the first 5 minutes of the game, went out with the injury. Malik Beasley plays 38 minutes, second most on the team next to Anthony Edwards. 29 points in 38 minutes for Malik Beasley off the bench, 9 of 19 shooting, so just a shade under 50%, 5 of 13 outside the arc, 6 of 7 at the free throw line. Beasley got to the free throw line 7 times, which does not happen often for him. He also chipped in 3 rebounds, a steal, and a block. But most importantly, that 29 points on 19 shots, the 5 made threes, the 6 free throws in 38 minutes. Beasley was huge throughout. And even though it was the Ant third quarter, it was the Ant dunk, it was the big 3-pointers from Ant. He had 6 on the game. It was the D'Lo fourth quarter. But Malik Beasley, just solid play throughout. And I've been clamoring for him to be in the starting lineup since before the season. I don't know if this is the moment. I have no idea if he starts Friday. I haven't put a ton of thought into it. I could definitely see that if Beverly's out. Or I could see them going back to what they were doing earlier this year. And maybe Vando and Jaden McDaniel start together. Maybe Taurean Prince starts at the 3 and they slide Ant down to the 2. That's probably more likely. I would start Malik Beasley because, again, I think he fits so well between D'Lo, Ant, and Towns and Vanderbilt that I think I just put him in the starting lineup, and maybe you give Jalen Noel those minutes off the bench. I mean, Josh Okogie didn't play again on Wednesday night. Maybe you give Josh Okogie those minutes. It's obviously, he doesn't quite give you what Pat Bev does, certainly not offensively, but he can at least replicate some of the defense. So if you want to keep that defensive edge, then maybe Beasley becomes the starter and Okogie comes off the bench. Maybe they start Okogie. There's like 4 different ways that they could do this. But if Beasley, it doesn't really matter ultimately, as long as Beasley's playing the crunch time minutes with the starters, with Towns, with D'Lo, with Anthony Edwards. And if he plays like he did on Wednesday, then this team's going to be really hard to slow down offensively. And also the flip side of this is he competed defensively. And we talked about this a lot on Wednesday's show coming out of the last win was the point of attack defense, and going from terrible to mediocre or decent, even better, is the same as going from decent to great. And if terrible defenders, previously terrible defenders like D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley can become adequate defenders, that raises the level of the entire defense. And look, I mean, right now on Basketball Reference, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the number 5 team in defensive rating in the league. They've been bottom 10 for as far back as I care to click in Basketball Reference. If you just go backwards year by year, I'm almost promising you it's one of the Garnett years. I went back over a decade the other day, and the Timberwolves were never higher than 21st. They were 28th in the Jimmy Butler playoff year in defensive rating. They were not a good defensive team despite Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, Tom Thibodeau. But now they're number 5, and Patrick Beverley is a big part of that. And obviously Jared Vanderbilt getting more minutes, and Jaden McDaniels getting more minutes, and Towns improving. But we have to look at D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley improving their defensive game to become adequate most of the time as a big piece of that. And I think that Malik deserves a shout out for that. And then my last takeaway is the D'Lo fourth quarter. I talked about it a lot already first segment, so I don't want to hit too much more on it. But the fact that Russell's okay with taking mostly a backseat for the first 3 quarters and then saying, all right, I'll take over now. I can handle this. And, when they're going right, it's okay to give him some ISO possessions. It's okay to give him the ability, the leeway to be a little bit more creative with his dribble and try and shoot off the dribble. And I know that it feels a little different after a win than after they lose. And then I come on the podcast and I say, man, D'Lo used a lot of possessions by himself in the fourth quarter. But I truly feel like if the team's going right and it's kind of and they just have this flow to the offense, and D'Lo can kind of sense when it's his turn to take over, I think that can work. As long as there's this understanding between Towns, Ant, and D'Lo, like what's happening here, who's getting the opportunities, what sets are we calling, how are we getting into this? Is it just D'Lo isolation time, or are we actually running anything to get him, an open shot in some other ways? Or he just operating pick and roll? And as long as there's communication as to how they get into this, the D'Lo fourth quarter closer role is something he can do, as long as it's not just done sloppily and lazily, which I think it was often done in the Ryan Saunders era, and not necessarily all Saunders' fault. I think that was the D'Lo Ryan butting heads thing. But so far under Chris Finch, other than a couple games here and there, or very early this season, I think that sort of dynamic could work with D'Angelo Russell after Ant is getting downhill and getting in people's faces at the rim and shooting deep threes all game, and Cat's in the post all game. And then all of a sudden you've got D'Lo killing you from the mid-range, shooting 28-foot threes and all this stuff. I think that can actually work out and be somewhat sustainable. All right. I want to close the show by doing individual studs and duds, and then taking a very quick peek at the Charlotte Hornets and that matchup ahead of Friday night's game in Charlotte. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It is Black Friday. Built is going all out to make this Black Friday weekend the most delicious Black Friday that ever was in the history of Black Fridays. New limited time flavors, new types of bars, and a winter wonderland of a deal. You want high-end deliciousness at a discount all through Black Friday weekend. Get at least 20% off anything and everything at Built.com with promo code LOCKED20. There's a brand new flavor, Ruby Chocolate Puffs, marshmallowy goodness covered in a unique chocolate. That's Ruby Chocolate. It's never been done with a Built Bar before. There's dark chocolate, there's white chocolate, and now Ruby Chocolate joins the Built Bar Club. Ruby Chocolate has a beautiful rose color, perfect for the holidays. It's an actual type of chocolate that has a berry taste to it. It's unique and delicious. Also, another new flavor, lemon dipped cheesecake puffs. Love lemon cheesecake? You'll love lemon dipped cheesecake puffs. That tangy taste of lemon, sweet cheesecake, and a marshmallowy puff, all covered in chocolate. It's lemon cheesecake sized taste, but without the cheesecake sized calories. Another new one is the Built Crave Bar. A Built Black Friday weekend isn't complete without the word free. Buy any box of Built bars through Sunday and get 2 of their brand new candy bars, Built Crave, for free. Built has finally done it. They've come up with a candy bar that is a great alternative to the bar that claims to satisfy. It's caramel flavored, chocolate loaded with peanuts, giving it that nutty, chocolatey, Oh, so good sweet candy bar taste. Crave has only 160 calories with 17 grams of protein. Show me a candy bar that even comes close. There's no need to fight angry crowds. No camping out for hours. Your best Black Friday deals are at built.com. 'Tis the season to save and give your taste buds the gift of Built Bar. 20% off Built Bars and 2 free Crave bars. 20% off and 2 free Crave bars, all at built.com. Plus, you can get 60% off Built Broth and Built Boost and 40% off Built Swag. Just enter code LOCKED20 at built.com. That's code LOCKED20 at built.com. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from Wednesday's Wolves Heat game. This is pretty easy. Number one, Anthony Edwards. We all know why. I mean, the dunk would probably, honestly, I don't just hand these things out here at Locked On Wolves, but I mean, the dunk gets, whether or not it counts, I don't care. 33 points, 14 rebounds, 6 steals, 3 assists, and a block for Ant. He shot 13 of 27 from the field, so just a hair under 50%, 6 of 15 from beyond the arc. I mean, that's fine. That's right in line with what he shoots. He only attempted 1 free throw in the 43 minutes. But, I mean, 14 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Who cares? He had 5 turnovers. 1 shouldn't count because it was the dunk that shouldn't have been a charge. I mean, plus 19 in 43 minutes. What more can we say about Anthony Edwards? He has these weird, off nights, and then he comes back like this, and it's like, I mean, if he did this every night, he'd be probably the best player in the league. But, like, can we, where's this thing going to even out? Is it going to even out at the April-May version of Ant from last year? Because that is an all-star player, or is it above that? Or is it a little below that? Where's this headed for Anthony Edwards this year? It's so fascinating to watch him grow as a 20-year-old, what this is going to turn into, even just this season. So he gets a stud in this game. The second one for me is Malik Beasley. Talked about him a little bit last segment, but 29 points at 9 of 19 shooting, 5 of 13 on threes, and 6 of 7 at the line. Really impressed with his 7 free throw attempts. The Wolves, as a team, by the way, 21 free throw attempts. They made 19, so they shot 90.5% from the line. Malik also added 3 rebounds, a steal, and a block, and 0 turnovers in 38 minutes. Was a plus 12 off the bench. Third best plus-minus mark on the team, and pinch hit for an injured Patrick Beverley. So a really impressive game from Malik Beasley. The third stud for me is Jared Vanderbilt. 25 minutes, 8 points, 15 rebounds, 4 steals, 3 assists, 1 turnover for Vando in 25 minutes, 2 of 3 shooting, 4 of 5 at the line. And fantastic defensively, fantastic on the offensive glass, on the glass overall. And I mean, what more can we say about Jared Vanderbilt? He was phenomenal, and he is such a huge find. I should probably dedicate a whole episode going back and I guess tooting my own horn, talking about how big of an acquisition this was to get Vanderbilt almost 2 years ago now, February of 2020, when the Wolves got him almost as a throw-in. They added Keita Bates-Diop to get back Jared Vanderbilt in that trade. A genius move by the front office at the time to add Jared Vanderbilt and get him, and then also to keep him in restricted free agency this last summer. That wasn't necessarily a guarantee that they were going to do that. And I clamored for him to get more playing time last year. The lineups were all fantastic with him on the court. They kept him around, and now he is entrenched as a starter with this team. So fantastic night from Vando. Going to name a dud because I have to. We could go Naz Reid. It was 0-4 shooting in 16 minutes, but did good work on the glass in his time as well. A couple guys with quieter nights, Jordan McLaughlin, Torian Prince, but those were smaller roles. I'm going to give it to Cat, mostly just because of the foul trouble and whether or not, we could talk about, the validity of those first 3 foul calls. But, I mean, at some point, the reputation precedes Karl-Anthony Towns, and he's got to be careful. He cannot do that, getting into foul trouble that early. He played decently well in the second half, but at the end of the day, 4 of 12 shooting, not what we'd expect. 1 of 5 from the line, from the 3-point line, 6 rebounds on the night in 29 minutes. It's just a little bit of a rough night for Cat, but to his credit, he finished the game as a plus 21. And I always add the caveat, there's plenty of noise to individual plus minus. Don't take it as the end all be all, but he led the team in plus minus. He was on the floor for the entirety of the second half after only playing 5 first half minutes, and, was okay. It just not what we'd expect. I'm grading this on a curve, and it wasn't your typical Karl-Anthony Towns night. But putting a bow on this, fantastic victory for the Timberwolves, 113-101, 12 points over one of the better teams in the league, the Miami Heat, a relatively healthy Miami Heat team that admittedly struggles on the road. And we talked about that on Wednesday's show, but this was an impressive all-around performance from the Timberwolves. And now we wait for news on Patrick Beverley. We hopefully we find out that he can get healthy here pretty quickly, and we'll see how the games go this weekend. Speaking of, let's talk about Charlotte really quickly. The Charlotte Hornets are relatively surprisingly 12-8 through their first 20 games of the season. They've played 20 games already. The Timberwolves have only played 18. The Wolves, of course, are 9-9. The Hornets have won 7 of their last 8 games. They actually were 5-7 and then have won 7 of 8, including a couple of impressive wins. They're one of only 2 teams to beat the Golden State Warriors so far this year. They also have a couple. They've also beat the Wizards twice during this stretch, but they've also beaten some more bottom feeders. They beat Orlando. They beat the Knicks, who have had a little bit of a tough time. They beat the Grizzlies, who are really middle of the pack. They beat the Pacers, who have had a tough season. So it's not been a murderer's row of opponents over their last 8 games. They've also had some bad losses earlier this year, including to the Kings. I guess that was really their only really bad one earlier this season. So been an impressive year. They've had some pretty good luck in close games, and they don't rank particularly well on either end of the floor. The Hornets don't. Defensively, they're 21st in defensive rating on Basketball Reference. They're 11th in offense. So they're not world beaters. They're pretty middle of the pack overall. And in fact, their expected win-loss in terms of their Pythagorean. So basically, their point differential suggests they should be 10-10, not 12-8. So that tells us there's been a little bit of luck there in terms of their results. And it's a team that the Timberwolves should be able to beat, but obviously not. They've won 7 of 8. They're playing really well. They're also a poor defensive rebounding team. They're a little bit ahead of the Wolves, but they're 28th in the league in defensive rebound rate. So it's a team that the Wolves should be able to, if they play certainly like they did. They were, I believe, a +12 against the Heat on Wednesday, and the Heat are one of the league's better rebounding teams. If Minnesota plays against the Hornets on the glass like they did against the Heat on Wednesday, they're going to win this game fairly easily. That's a big if, because they were fantastic on the glass on Wednesday. But if they're able to do that, this is a very winnable game. Obviously, LaMelo Ball has been great. His botched self alley-oop from the other night notwithstanding. If you missed that, go find it on Twitter. But he tried to throw himself an alley-oop off the glass and messed it up in a close, like a 2-point game early in the game. Didn't make any sense. He's played really well. Miles Bridges had a good season. Gordon Hayward's continues to kind of, be a good player for them. Kelly Oubre Jr. in his first year in Charlotte has been decent. Jalen McDaniels, Jaden's brother, is kind of a fringe rotation guy off the bench for them, but has had a nice season so far. So they're a fun team. And the game's in Charlotte, of course, on Friday. So it's certainly going to be a tough one. I didn't look up the line, but I would guess that Charlotte's only favored by a point or 2 in this one. It'll be a really close game. It would be my guess. And then after the Charlotte game, the Wolves turn around and play against the Philadelphia 76ers on Saturday. Right now, the reports are that the word is that Joel Embiid's going to try and make his return from missing the last couple of weeks due to COVID-19. He may try and come back against the Wolves on Saturday. So we may get to see Embiid Towns, which has not typically gone well for Towns and the Wolves in the past, but we'll see how that turns out this Saturday. In terms of programming notes, this is Friday's show. We will not have a post-game podcast, more holiday weekend travel on Friday night. So the next show will very likely be a Monday morning show. So we'll kind of look back at the weekend at both the Charlotte and Philadelphia games over the weekend. And then we'll be back on a regular schedule next week, Monday through Friday, plus post-game pods, including the weekend. So this weekend's just a little bit off our normal schedule, but we'll be make sure to hit all the high points from Friday and Saturday on Monday's show. So be sure, if you're not already following or subscribed to the show, that you do so wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. You can, of course, watch on YouTube as well as any of the audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, that's all we have for you today. Thanks once again for listening to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.